Hello, my friends. I am your host, Daniel Willcocks, and you're listening to episode number 26 of the Writer's Chair podcast. And it is Tuesday, 30th of June, 2026, as I record this. In today's show, I'm talking to British horror author Alex Hunter about his new book, The House That Screamed, how hitting #1 on the Amazon Free Store taught him the value of real readers, the difference between scaring readers and haunting them. That was a huge lesson for me. That really blew my mind. How to approach small press submissions and vet them before signing, why Alex isn't interested in self-publishing, and much, much more, so stick around for that. But before we get into all of that, here's my personal update. So as usual, lots going on. I launched the Writer's Room as of the 14th of June, so I'm very, very excited, and I didn't get into this last week because I didn't do a little intro in the episode itself, but we are now on week 3 of the Writer's Room, so I have a wonderful group of authors who have all chosen to join me on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. UK time, and we spend an hour and a half just doing our words and talking in the breaks and using it as really a sacred space just to get our words done and work on our books. I am already halfway through edits of a novella that I'm really, really pushing to get over the line. That's been in the works for a few years. I say in the works. I hate it when people say that because I've not been working on it constantly for a few years. I kind of finished it and then put it down and didn't forget about it, but other things happened. But the point being, I'm working on that and I'm halfway through and it's a lot of fun. And also just the people in there are kind of awesome so far. So if you are someone who is looking for a space to get your words done and you want to join us and you fancy just every Tuesday jumping into a 90-minute area in which you can work on your book, make sure you're getting that work done. I know how hard it is to squeeze that time in every week and make sure you're working on what you need to be working on. It's there for you. So you can find out all about that over at danielwillcocks.com/the writer's room. And there'll be a link for that in the show notes. And it's Willcocks with a double L and a C-O-C-K-S, because I don't know if I've ever said that on the podcast, but it is probably the longest way of spelling my name. And I'm doing a lot of house move stuff at the minute. So I've had to use that a lot and be very, very clear with how my surname is spelled. Also to update, as of Sunday, 28th of June, which is the previous Sunday to when I'm recording this, Hatching season submissions are now closed. So we had over 170 submissions. I'm now in the process of working on a spreadsheet in which the fun admin bit behind editing anthologies. I'm working on a spreadsheet in which I've got a team of, I think we've got about 12 readers, including myself, that are going to go through and blind judge the story. So part of what I'm doing now is making sure that all of that identifiable information is removed so that every story has an equal chance of entering into the anthology itself. And it's always fun because you basically get to a point where you narrow down the stories, you get to your finalists, and then you reveal to yourself who the authors are. And it's exciting. Sometimes you'll see some names in there that you're familiar with. Sometimes you'll see people who are brand new, and that's also exciting. And so thank you for everyone who spread the word, who entered the story into the anthology. It's all going towards a fantastic cause for people who, this might be your first episode listening to the show. It's a charity anthology, so 100% of all the proceeds are going towards mind.org.uk. There's all stories about that posted on the submissions page if you do want to check that out. But yeah, it's very exciting. Like I'm not taking a penny for this. It's all editing in the evenings and that kind of stuff. So exciting. That'll be rolling soon. And the aim is to try and get everything together so that we can release that before Halloween, because Halloween and horror and all that kind of stuff, you know, it's kind of the perfect time to put that in the oven. So yeah, that's exciting. And then I'm also, what else am I doing? So I've got one novella that is nearly fully over the line. I've got another one, which I've just got another blurb back from a fellow author, which I'm excited for. I've got 2 non-fictions in the work, one of them being a reworking of the self-publishing blueprint to make it relevant for 2026, including a brand new cover, brand new design inside. I'm totally redoing the page layouts and making it a really, really pretty book to have on people's shelves. Because it was really, really interesting going back and reading through something that I wrote back in 2021, and #1, seeing how much stuff has moved on. But the most interesting stuff for me, and kind of what I'm proudest of with this book, is that the idea of the self-publishing blueprint it's twofold. The first one is to lay out step by step everything you need to know in order to self-publish your book. So it doesn't go really, really in the weeds with how to write a book or certain things, but what it does is it lays out the roadmap so that wherever you are in that process, you can sit and go, okay, here are the main things I need to be exploring. And that sprang off of, I was coaching dozens of authors, and that question just kept popping up of what happens next, what is the path, this is so overwhelming. And so the book is just a collection of start to finish, the top level, how to self-publish a book, with loads of tips that are very much still relevant of my experience, how I still approach self-publishing a book. And you can just take it step by step. But the second part of that is I wanted to create something that is going to sound really, really pretentious, and I'm aware of it. I wanted it to transcend the operational side of publishing a book. So while you know what to do with the book in there, the whole point behind it is kind of the universal principles of what publishing is. So, you know, it doesn't matter what program you use to format your book. Here are the things that you need to know about formatting your book. You don't need to know specifically which social media platforms are taking off or kicking off, because that's a loaded question anyway. But no matter what social media platform you use, there are fundamental principles as to how to promote something well. And so this book is kind of, it's that level. So it gives you the ability to be able to go, what am I good at? Where am I in the process? What do I need to research further? And yeah, I'm very, very happy with where it's at now. So we are close to having it done. I say I am close to having it done. I'm hoping to get that out in the next few months or so, as well as a brand new nonfiction, which I've not really teased too much about, but that's more about finishing a draft and productivity and a kind of writing challenge in there as well. So all exciting. I'm looking forward to getting to the point where I can actually start putting some real stuff out for you to see, which will be soon. And on promises that I've been teasing for a while, as of recording, the course is not done. It is Tuesday, the 30th of June. As of the Friday in which this episode goes live, so if you're listening to it on the Friday this is going live today, and obviously everyone in the future, I now have a brand new free 7-day course designed to help you finish your draft. And the principles behind this course is it's 7 days, it's free, it's absolutely free. You just literally jump on, sign up, download it from my website. Over 7 days, every morning, you're going to get an email with information, with a task, with a video from myself. And the entire purpose of this course is it's essentially my 7 top tips on everything I've learned over a decade of writing books and publishing over 70 books that took me from when I was struggling to write my first story. And believe me, I did struggle. I had a, you know, as you do when you start writing, I was like, I want to write a book. I'm going to start the first of a fantasy trilogy. And for about 4 or 5 months, I wrote the first chapter. I wrote the second chapter. I went back, re-edited the first chapter, re-edited the second chapter, rewrote the first one, did the third one. And I was just spinning my wheels for about 4 months. Now I'm at the point in which, even with a full-time day job, even when I was working a full-time day job and was living with my son, I was finishing drafts in 2-3 months. So it is the 7 biggest tips, tricks, and tools that I still use to this day to help me finish a draft. And my hope is people who will sign up for this course will, if you're struggling, if you have been struggling to finish a draft for a while, if you're brand new into the writing space, these tips will, well, I can guarantee if you follow what is in this course, because I've done it with hundreds of authors in nano challenges and things. But if you follow the steps in this course, if you really, really absorb them, take the time to take them in, you will shave hours, days, weeks, months off of finishing that first draft. And I've said it again and again on every podcast I've ever featured on my own podcast. The most powerful thing you can do as an author is write the end on the first draft of your novel for the first time. And that's really what I'm trying to give you. So as of this second in which I'm recording this in the transmutated space and time, I have not yet finished it. I will be making it live by the latest of Wednesday, the 1st of July. As of when this episode airs, which is all you guys care about, if you go to danielwillcocks.com/finish, you will find you can download and access this brand new course. Tell your friends, it's all free. Jump on, download it, and you will find everything you need to finish that first draft. So there we go. That's me babbling done. Today's episode, as I mentioned, features the wonderful Alex Hunter, and I really, really enjoyed speaking to Alex for many, many reasons. So most of it is, as you'll know from the past 5 minutes of me babbling, I am very much involved in self-publishing, and I believe a lot in self-publishing and independent publishing. And it always really pleases me to have conversations with people that just do not want to self-publish. And while that wasn't the entirety of the conversation, one thing I really, really respect about Alex is he has taken his career and his experience from working in PR, from working in communications and all that kind of thing, to being able to submit stories to small presses and understand the ladder of getting your book published. Like, not everyone can be that breakout hit that gets the lightning bolt and just, rockets to the top of the charts. A lot of people are doing what Alex is doing and putting in the work, making connections, building that journey. And it was just a pleasure speaking to Alex. And even I, from this conversation, learned a lot about a few different ways to approach, particularly horror books, but you can transcend that to any horror or any dark fear, haunting mystery within your books. And yeah, just a really, really good chat. So I am excited to see where Alex goes next, but you need to see where Alex is going first. So I'm going to shut up. And if you are ready, I am ready. It's time to pull up a chair, grab a notepad, and let's get into it. The first child in his school year to be granted an adult library card, Alex Hunter borrowed The Rats by James Herbert and began dreaming of giving other people nightmares. His debut novel, The Harvest, was published in 2025. His latest novel, The House That Screamed, explores how trauma can be packaged, commodified, and consumed. His third novel, The Forest Remembers, will be published in 2027. Alex spends his time writing in the company of too many books and not enough daylight. Alex, I am so excited to get stuck into this. First of all, you're a listener of the show, so that's always really fun to have someone who has reached out as part of being from the listenership, but also is writing and doing some amazing stuff. And secondly, from reading your bio, one thing that grabbed me straight away is that The Rats was your gateway horror book. And as someone who loved the Rats themselves, tell us what it was that gripped you so much and kind of brought you into the love of books.
Firstly, it was the cover. So this is going back. So this would have been probably the early 80s, very early 80s. And in those days, particularly, horror novels had the most incredibly graphic, like gnarly. And obviously, I'm a kid in the library. I get an adult library card. I go through them. That's it. It's bloody and it's disgusting. And I'm thinking, I need to know what this is about. And that was the start for me.
And it just took you from there. I found one of the things that, because I didn't, James Herbert, I think I came to later. My first ever proper horror book was Cujo by obviously Stephen King. Loved it, absolutely loved it. But the Rats I'd heard so much about, and I didn't actually get into until I was I think I was 15 when I read Cujo, and maybe 24, 25 when I read The Rats. And one thing I loved about it was it was very simple writing. It didn't over describe. It wasn't very kind of like flowery. It was just like, here's what's going on. These rats are messing up London. Like, what was it specifically about the writing and the story that got you into the groove?
Do you know what? I mean, I think the simplicity point is a really good one, actually, because James Herbert underwrites, and I like to underwrite as it happens. And I think probably, despite the subject matter, I think as a kid, it was quite a good gateway into adult fiction, because it is actually not a difficult book to follow. It's not intellectually challenging. It is written in a language that probably most people could understand.
Yeah.
So I think that is really appealing. And also it's a really propulsive narrative. It starts off fast. It just gets faster. It gets more shocking as it goes on. And in that sense, there's something about James Herbert. It is the purest distillation of horror that you can get. And I don't think there's many other writers of that era who were writing in quite that register. A little bit later, you have people like Sean Hudson, who did similar things with Slugs. You read Cujo when you were a kid. Clearly, attacking animals is a thing.
Yes.
Because, interesting. And we probably need a bit more of that. So there's an idea. But I think what his books did was they did, particularly those earlier books, they did exactly what they said on the tin, which is that they were scary and they were gnarly and they were propulsive and repulsive. And you really can't say fairer than that.
No, that's it. And like, I think there's something to be said about that pulp fiction. I almost sometimes think of it as popcorn fiction. And like, for me, I've got James Herbert's one of them. I haven't yet read Sean Hudson. I still need to. I've got a few of his books. But Richard Lehman's another one for me that kind of fits that group of just like, nothing held back, just go into the horror. And you say, obviously, that was something that kind of has influenced your writing. But before we get a bit more deeper into your specific writing, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in the world of writing your own books.
Yeah, so I'm not for these people who say that I wrote since I was, in a high chair. I've written for pleasure really for a long time as a hobby, but hadn't really done anything with it. And a few years ago, I was made redundant, and I thought, okay, I've got a choice. I can sit around in my underpants and watch Netflix, nice, fine, or I can actually do something worthwhile. And I'd always wanted to write a novel. And I thought, well, this is just the opportunity now presents itself to do so. That was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I haven't really stopped since. So the result of that was The Harvest. I really wasn't sure what on earth was going to happen with it. Found a publisher, an indie press, a small pressing based in Texas, which is interesting because no British indie press showed any interest in it at all. And I thought that would be the one thing that I would do. And now I can't stop. And they're evolving, they're changing. The books are changing all the time. And How It Screamed, I think I'd like to say is a better book than The Harvest, because The Harvest has that whole kind of debut, crazy, manic energy to it, whereas The House That Screamed is a little bit more refined.
Yeah.
I think. And this was my way of going, okay, I loved haunted house stories as a kid. Can I write one that isn't going to sound like 2,000 other haunted house stories?
It's a hard thing to tackle, is trying to bring fresh life into an old genre. I definitely want to get into The House That Screamed, but before we get there, the Harvest won, or was a runner-up in the Maxi Awards last year, horror and suspense. So you went from being made redundant to working on this book to being rejected enough times by UK publishers to then looking and finding this Texas publisher. There's quite a long journey that I think probably needs a bit more exploration, because I'm going to be a little bit selfish with this interview, just because at the minute I'm looking more into, I've done a lot of self-publishing. I've had sort of a few ghostwritten things through other presses and stuff, but I'm on that path to look at different presses and kind of find the best approach to getting your book into the hands of a press of some kind. What was that journey for you? Was self-publishing something you considered, or was it sort of straight for you into the realm of looking for representation?
Yeah, self-publishing wasn't something that I considered, and I think for two reasons. One, I felt like I needed a degree of validation, because I thought, I think this is good, and people that have read it think it's quite good, but I kind of wanted someone to say, oh yeah, this is publishable. So that was really the first thing. And the second thing is, I just didn't want the business of self-publishing, because I thought, well, if I'm going to be writing, then the last thing I want to be doing is thinking about sorting out my own cover design, editing, so on and so forth. So that was really why I said, right, no to self-publishing. And I think the journey, I think it's really interesting to me. I think small presses are doing so much around horror. You obviously interviewed people from Raw Dog Screaming and so on and so forth. Like, there's such a lot going on in terms of kind of horror and dark fiction and the small presses, where I feel like, without wanting to go into, I feel like the big five are still not quite there, or they're not quite there at the moment. So it was an interesting experience for me, and I'm quite comfortable. I'm actually querying at the moment, so we'll see what happens with that. And just before I came onto this podcast, I had a rejection.
Hey, congrats.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Step in the right direction, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, another rejection. I'm just quite good at going, file that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really about what works for the writer. And at the end of the day, I am very much the view that the process has to end up with the end user, which is the reader. Mm-hmm. And it is about, okay, what is the best route for a particular project to get into the hands of readers? And that's all I care about at the end of the day, is that somebody hopefully is going to read this stuff and enjoy it and find it entertaining and thought-provoking and interesting enough to maybe read something else. And I'm not sure readers discriminate nowadays with imprints and with who the publisher is. I certainly don't. Doesn't really occur to me.
No, I think there's a big sort of bubble of, when you get into the writer sphere, sometimes you get sucked into thinking like a writer rather than thinking like a reader. And, obviously we all come into writing through reading. And as you say, it wasn't really until I started writing that I even bothered to look at the copyright page to see who did the imprint, to see which publisher was doing whatever. Like, there's a whole conversation around what is the right length of a book and novellas and stuff. And I don't think readers care, as long as it's a good experience for whoever's picking it up. what was your kind of entry into writing? You say you've been, writing for pleasure for a lot of your life. What did that look like, and how did you find that transition from taking a book from something that was a bit more, let's say, hobby-esque into something you're like, okay, let's do something with this?
Yeah, I mean, I was messing around with all sorts of things, not necessarily horror. So I used to write a lot of, not fan, well, I want to say fanfic, really, but essentially kind of Doctor Who fan fiction, things like that. Alien stuff like that, stuff that I liked. And I would write short stories and just kind of play around with them, really. But not really with a view to doing anything. And in my mind, I had always anticipated that I would write a novel, not because I wanted to write like the great horror novel, but just because I thought I need to get this out of my system. It was just that life got in the way and stuff happened, and probably I was too lazy, to be honest, to really knuckle down. And I started a few things, and I never had that moment where I thought, oh, okay, I feel like this is a thing. And I've learned, I think, over this period, what I've learned is there is a point for me where a story starts to tell itself and it becomes almost like automatic writing. And that is kind of transcendent and almost religious, actually, in its intensity, I find. I love the fact I can go back to pages and not remember writing them, especially if they're good.
It's always the best.
Yeah, and I think with The Harvest, A, I had time on my hands, and B, that happened. And I really had a very clear idea. I'm not a plotter, but I had quite a clear idea in my head when I sat down, okay, who are these characters? This is who they are. And this is who's probably going to make it to the end of the book. And that's the thing that I really kind of enjoy. And it's interesting because that was a 2-year drafting process, and I can now draft in 12 weeks. Because I kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I've got a question, by the way. Sorry, I've just gone off on a.
No, just taking it from hobby to something a bit more.
Yeah, and it's a thing, isn't it? I think when you have your first book published, you suddenly realise, oh, actually, I am. That's the thing. But a book that I read is just a file, isn't it, or an object? Mm-hmm. But when then suddenly people start going onto Goodreads or Amazon, going, "Oh, I read this," and either they enjoyed it or they didn't enjoy it. But in that sense, it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that people. I had a message from someone in Sydney saying, "Oh, I loved The Harvest. I had a really great time with it," and I was like blown away because that's someone literally on the other side of the world, and that you suddenly kind of think, "Oh, actually, I am actually a storyteller now. It's part of who I am." What I
Australia approved.
Australia approved. And I'm there for it.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there that is something that I'm coaching someone at the minute who's kind of going through this process of she's completing her first stories and there's a lot of conversation about speed and the right speed and stuff. And you obviously said then that The Harvest was a 2-year process for writing. Was that the first draft itself or sort of several drafts?
Several drafts, yeah.
Yeah. And then now you can kind of distill that down into something more akin to 12 weeks, which is like quite a considerable reduction down. That first sort of 2 years of drafting, how did you get yourself across the finish line? Because what I find is a lot of people I speak to have the idea to write. They have an idea of a story. Maybe they've kind of jotted down a few bits on scraps of paper, potentially done a chapter. But then the actual, let's say, burden of getting or like even just moving this marathon of writing, how did you find getting through that process? And what were sort of some of the things that brought you to the end?
I think I realised 2 things. I think I realised to stop being pretentious.
Okay, let's dive into that a bit deeper.
Yeah, so I did. I mean, at one point, I think I had a prologue that was about 2,000 words, which were all beautiful words and all very clever. And I think I was a bit inspired by Black House, and I thought, right, I'm going to write this really detailed kind of prologue, and I'm going to kind of take the camera along the street and talk about the people who live in different houses. I suddenly reached a point where I was like, what have I done? Who cares about this stuff? It's just so boring and pretentious. And it works in Black House because you've got 2 people at the top of their game. For a debut writer, not so much. And I think as well, I did reach a point where I thought, actually, what I need to do is get to the end of this story. And I think I think I got myself too bogged down in going, oh, I'll just look at chapter 3. I'll rewrite that before I'd actually finished the manuscript.
Hmm.
And once I was like, actually, I need to concentrate on the finish line, then I was in a much better place.
Yeah.
Um,
And I do want to just linger on that because I'm recording a course at the minute which kind of takes people through the big lessons I learned about getting across the finish line. And I think that is so just missed a lot in conversation because the way that you worded it, obviously pretentious in that first draft, arguably that is what people do. They come to that first page or that first chapter and they just perfect and they spin that wheel. And like you say, it was that mindset shift of actually, let's just get the story down and then we can kind of put in some of the pretentious, but getting across that. And I just wanted to highlight that because I think that is so fundamentally key. And I think that might be one of the main things that takes people from writer to author.
yeah, and I think as well. So the more recent stuff I've been doing, occasionally, if I'm not if I'm not in the moment, I will literally put, I don't know, chapter 10 brackets. It's something like this needs to happen here, and then I'll
Yeah.
just leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that takes away a degree of pressure because I know that something needs to happen. I just can't quite got it, and and that's fine. And then I can go back to it later on. But it means I'm not. It means I'm continuing to move forward without sitting there thinking, I don't know I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I quite like that actually.
Yeah. So was that what other lessons did you learn along the way? Obviously, be less pretentious in chapter 1.
Yeah, definitely be less pretentious. I think it probably not worry so much about being too obvious about being scary. I think I got very hung up on, oh, I haven't done kind of scary for a few pages, therefore something needs to happen that's scary here. I think I've learned to trust myself a bit more about the reader will, if it's nice writing and it's interesting, the reader will go with it rather than be constantly waiting. Well, depending on the reader, but I think I was very worried about, oh, there hasn't been a big gory scary moment for X number of pages, so I need to have something. I'm probably overthinking some of that stuff rather than letting it come naturally. And that was a real issue for me. And I look back actually at the Harvest, and I have to say there's some stuff in there that I wouldn't probably write now
Yeah.
because it is disgusting. Someone came up to me recently and went, "Have you put any more babies in an oven?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, what's she talking about?" And she went, "It's in your book." And I went, "Oh yeah, so,
Well, we found
yes,
the episode title.
yes, so it is. Let's, you know, it's yes, it is in the book. I was like, "What on
Yeah.
earth is this person saying to me?" I have no idea. Um, and I guess, and I think as well, this is something. I mean, I suppose I'm less interested in. I want to scare people because scaring people is fun, and being scared is being fun. My ambition at the moment is to haunt them, which I think
Okay.
is slightly different.
Explain.
So I think there's that thing about being scared in the moment, isn't there? But I
Yes.
think there's also that thing about sometimes when you finish a book, you find yourself having to sit with it for a
Gotcha.
while. So Echo, for example, is a book that I loved in recent years by Thomas Alder Huvolt, and I hope I pronounced that right, which I found existentially frightening.
Right. He's the author of Hex, right?
That's right. So Echo is a very, very good book, but it is, for me, I found it genuinely haunting. I had dreams about that book. I couldn't, after I finished it, I couldn't quite get it out of my head, and there were images that were in there that I found just utterly disturbing. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh, okay, that I kind of want to make that happen to readers.
I'd never thought about it like that. I I had that experience with Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
from page 1, I think I read that in just over a day. It just gripped me, and there was just the feeling around. And for me, I think a lot of that comes from the stories from a child's perspective tend to have more of that feeling for me. I don't know if that's more of my own psychology, but like Boy's Life by Robert McCann is one of my favorite books, and again, that stays with me because it's that kind of childlike naivety and sort of innocence that we remember so well and forget in adult life coming back very, very well displayed on the page. So I hadn't thought about it like that. That's really, really interesting. So
It's,
how are you approaching making that happen? Is this something that you think you've achieved with The House That Screamed? Is it something you're looking at doing in the new book?
the House that Screamed definitely has some of that stuff in it. So on the face of it, it is a horror romp. It's a haunted house book, but there is something else going on in DC, so it's quite twisty.
Mm-hmm.
And so, without wanting to give anything away, it is the kind of book you get to the end, and I think you could then think, "Oh, okay, I'm not sure that what I thought was happening was actually what was happening."
Okay.
Which was one of the reasons it was such a challenge to write, because I wanted to leave the reader with that impression of thinking, "Oh, okay, I now need to reframe everything I've just read,"
Yes.
because and that was quite tricky. Um, Also, why on earth I decided to write a dual timeline meta horror set in a part of the United States that I've never been to is anybody's guess. And I keep saying never again. I'm really proud. I'm really proud of it, but
Yeah.
it was a killer.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I don't know that I've written anything set in a place that I've ever lived in. I don't
No,
know
well,
why. I don't know why, but it's a
it's
fun challenge.
it is a challenge, isn't it? And it was partly an homage to Peter Straub, who
Okay.
wrote obviously Ghost Story. He set in New York State, which is where the House that Screamed is set.
Mm-hmm.
But famously, he'd never been there.
Interesting.
And I thought, oh, okay. And I love that book. With this, my absolute favourite. Ghost Story is my favourite novel ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, right, okay, I want. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Peter Straub, by the way, but I thought that is me paying homage to Peter Straub, is to set it
Yeah.
in small town New York State.
Yeah. Well, so okay, let's get a little bit into craft here, because I'm thinking writing a haunted story of any kind with ghosts is there's a particular skill that comes with writing those kind of stories. And I would almost say that if anyone's listening to this that writes like mystery or sort of thrillery with mysterious components, like it kind of transcends into the ghost thing. One thing that I know that I struggle with those kind of stories is, as the writer, you know the twists and you know the things that are happening, so nothing is really secret from yourself. Whereas what you hope is that a reader who is coming to something blind doesn't follow you along those breadcrumbs, but that there's enough breadcrumbs that they could once they get there. You say yourself, similar to myself, it sounds like you have an idea of where you want to go, but you kind of find out in the moment a lot of what you're writing. You're not really too much of a plotter. How do you achieve, or how do you, I think it's impossible to say you've ever fully achieved it, but how have you approached trying to make it so that it's a mystery to the reader while you know what's going on?
Yeah, a lot of that happened in the rewrite, in the edit.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished drafting that book. I put it aside. In fact, I stopped writing at one point because I just wasn't really happy with it. And then I went back to it and thought, no, it's actually is okay. And then I finished it, and then I put it to one side and went back to it. Basically, I took the book apart, and that was relatively easy because it's set in different timelines, and there are a number of the parts of the book are told through news stories, articles,
Mm-hmm.
bits from other books, film scripts, emails. So I literally took all of those components out and reordered them because, yeah, absolutely what you say is right. Because you want to have the big thing that is like the, oh, really moment at
Mm-hmm.
towards the end. You don't want it to feel like a cheat that you've just dropped something in and that actually people can't go, oh, yeah, I can now see
Yeah.
what was going on. And so it was really about taking the thing apart and then putting it back together in a slightly different order, so that it and taking some bits away and putting some new bits in, so it felt like it worked as a piece. And
Mm-hmm.
also, one of the things I did quite deliberately was I really leaned into tropes. So all of the tropes are in there, and that all of them,
Yeah.
basically, from the local psychic to the blood running out of the taps. I threw it all in there, but I did that partly to subvert them.
Mm.
So you hopefully what people think they're going to get, they will get to an extent, but they'll get something beyond that, which is going to make them think, oh, okay, this is, feels a bit different, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. So but a lot of it was just about constructing and pulling apart kind of Lego bricks and then putting it back together in a slightly different shape until I reached a point where I thought, okay, this now, from beginning to end, yes, there are breadcrumbs, but hopefully people will see them after the fact.
Yeah.
If they work it out in advance, then fab. That's also part of the fun.
Smart cookies. I love that, earlier in the conversation you said about trying to bring a fresh take to what is quite a what's the word? Saturated genre, really, with the haunted house. And your approach to that was include everything. I really like that as an almost like backwards way of thinking, to kind of, as you say, in a way to subvert the reader's expectations, throw it in so it becomes. And I haven't read this book yet. It's out as of this recording. It'll be out next week. As of the time this goes live, it'll be last week. It comes out on the 25th of June. So I'm almost imagining kind of just being overwhelmed by these ideas and these like such familiarities that you start chasing rabbits down holes and then just finding like another animal or like a pit somewhere else where you're like, oh no, this is what's actually going on. Is that kind of the approach?
Yeah, exactly. And also, I love those. I mean, I think you used a very nice word, because I would use the word hackneyed,
Right.
in relation to a lot of haunted house fiction. But part of the joy of it, of course, as a reader or as a film goer, because film really informed this book as well. So I spent a lot of time examining film franchises because there's a film franchise in the book, which is part of the story. But you know what you're getting. You want to get those things that you're going to get. So going in, you're probably going to get stuff through, like sliding down the walls and strange things appearing. But you want that, I think, or I do. I want all of that. Yeah, I want all of that Amityville stuff. That's what I want. And the psychic who goes, get out, it's a gateway to hell. It's all in there because that's part of the joy of this subgenre. But it's also about trying to find a way into it. And I hope I've done it, but trying to find a way into it that feels a little bit different and a bit fresh. And using that format and the idea of the house becoming a kind of cultural touchstone, because 25-year timeline. So the house becomes a sort of cultural artifact, and the haunting, which is no longer really owned by the people who experienced it. It's owned by film companies and novelists and other people. So what is the truth? And I thought that was quite an interesting thing to play with.
Oh, I like that. With the book coming out next week, as I say, at this time of recording, one thing that I'm very, very curious about is the fact that, as you say, you have gone down the route of a small press publication because you don't want to handle all the business side of things and everything that comes with running a self-publishing business. And the minute you said that, I was like, yep, there's like most of my day to day has been like sourcing book covers and looking at editorial and all that kind of stuff that comes with being in the self-publishing sphere. What does then marketing look like for you at this point? Obviously, there'll be some efforts from the press. What are they looking at doing for the book? Is there any kind of expectation on you, sort of contractually or anything else? And obviously, only feel free to share what you're happy sharing. Yeah. But yeah, it's just interesting because I often feel like we're in a position where publishers are now looking for people who have audiences, who are able to do a lot of their self-promotion efforts. But is that just something that I'm blind to and assuming because of my self-pub, or is that kind of your experience that you found?
No, I've heard that. I mean, it's not my experience, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, the publisher does what they do in terms of some advertising and things like that, and they do the cover design and typesetting, all that kind of stuff that publishers do. I think, from my part, and it's partly a learning experience, it's about trying different things to see what works. So, for example, chasing endorsements from other writers is down to me, which is kind of stressful, but I enjoy it because obviously if other writers like it, that's a nice thing. And doing the kind of Insta stuff is down to me. which I do, which I haven't even looked at. Well, I have looked at TikTok. I set up an account, looked at it, spent an hour and a half looking at it, and then shut my account because it was just too much. I was just like, this is a time drain. This is not knitting. This is doing social media. And I think it's also about, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, the product is the product, and hopefully people like it enough that becomes a kind of self-fulfilling thing, because I'm much more interested in organic growth than I am in sort of big promotional pushes. And I'm learning. So one of the things that we did with the Harvest was we did a 2-day free promo. And it went to #1 in free horror on the whole of Amazon. And I was like, oh my, this is unbelievable. This has gone to #1. And I remember it because I went to Blenheim Palace and they've got scaffolding out by Blenheim Palace, and you're allowed to go up and see the view. And I was checking my phone and I was like, oh my God, it's #1. It's on Amazon in #1. It's free horror. It's #1. And I hardly got any new reviews out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about learning. It's about learning those things. I was saying earlier, I won't do a free promotion for the House to Scream, because actually what that is about is people, and I can't blame them, essentially loading up their Kindles and then probably with lots and lots of books and then never reading them.
Yes.
So it's about, I think it's about, genuinely it's about quality over quantity. And would I rather have 5 people chose to buy the book and one of them maybe review it, than however many thousands of people download something for nothing, or hundreds, I don't remember the numbers, to be honest. But I'm much more, because I'm a PR person in my corporate life. I'm all about organic growth. And hopefully getting people talking about it rather than me being. I mean, I like talking about it, but I'm not interested. I'm not keen. I don't know about you. I have a real allergic reaction to authors. I get why they do it, but who have that kind of buy my book energy, and every post that they put online is buy my book. And I find myself thinking, please stop, because there's something really off-putting about that. Whereas I'm much more interested in talking about horror and talking about things that I like that are not related to my book, that then people might think, oh, okay, I share tastes with this fella, so maybe his book is going to be something that I like.
Yeah. There's a lot in this conversation that I think is absolute gold for people listening to this and new into the sphere, sort of, again, like whether they're early in their writing or they kind of just published that first book. And you kind of already answered the question of where does that kind of mindset mentality come from, of the slower growth, of kind of being a bit more purposeful with how you reach out and for want of a better word, curate that kind of personal persona out online. And I think a couple of things, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm drawing is, authenticity of speaking from a position of just genuine, you come across like you like horror and you've written a book because you love the genre, and that kind of shows. And, these people that do just come online and they're buy my book. My argument to that is always like, why?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, and especially, I did a little bit when I first started. It was like, I've written a book, everyone should read this. And now a lot of my content is a lot more like, you will like this book because X, Y, Z. If you liked this, you will also like this book. And it's going from that, like you said earlier, that reader first mentality of what is it they're going to get and how will they feel about seeing that? Like, it's not, a reader doesn't care that you've written a book. Not really. They care that they're going to read a story that is interesting, that grips them, that is reflective of other things they like. And a lot of that seems to pull through. And mentioning also that you work in PR also brings me into a nice little segue, because it kind of also makes a little bit of sense. And maybe you've got some nice little tips on this, but we kind of, I think we didn't promise this offline, but definitely wanted to mention this. You were blurbed by one of the big stars in horror at the minute. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about and who that is for...
So I was blurred by Claver Cloud Chapman.
Which is fun.
Which is fun, which is very and a unique blurb that only he could write, that I can't even, he calls it, amongst other things, I think a blood and guts found footage frappuccino. Yeah. Which is exactly what I thought the book was. So we were obviously really and then obviously, absolutely. And Clay has then gone on to win Bram Stoker Award just a few days ago, which is also really, really exciting and well deserved, and been quite a long time coming. And I think I reached out to him because I thought I had some really good blurbs for the Harvest. I had some writers who were incredibly generous. People like Stephanie Salms-Jacobs, Steve Stredd,
Mhm.
who blurbed that book, and they were very, very generous because the horror community is a very generous community. But I wanted to swing for the fences a little bit with The House That Screamed, and I thought, who is going to enjoy this book? Clay McLeod Chapman, because it's a bit satirical, it's kind of crazy in places. So I just sent him a message. I said, "This is the back cover copy. If you fancy, I think you might like it." And he went, "Yes, send it over," which I wasn't really expecting. And then having
Just a
sent it,
double blink moment.
yeah, I thought, yeah, well, who are you? What? And I thought, oh, okay. So I sent it to him, and I thought, well, that will be the last I hear of that. And then he sent me the blurb and said, "I've read the book. This is my blurb." And I did a little dance that I could probably never recreate, and I'm hugely grateful
Mm.
that for that. And also, I'm really pleased that my instincts were right and that he did enjoy it because I thought it was right in his lane.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, it's a bit surreal, but
Yeah,
very cool. And I
yeah,
think, when you just have to ask people, don't you?
yeah. And this is, I think, one of the things that, because blurbs, I think they're kind of sometimes a bit hit and miss. Like sometimes a blurb really seems to carry a book. And for people listening who aren't familiar, it's where you have someone who is quite well known or some other authority in the space reviews your book and you put that on the front cover of the paperback and the ebook and all that, well, all your blurbs and things. But sometimes they can carry the weight and other times they can kind of just sit there and not do a lot. But as you say, the trick really is just reaching out and asking people. But in my experience, I found there is a way to do that because, I've had it myself where I've had, a deluge of emails from people just like, can I come on the podcast? Can I do this? Can you read this? Can you read that? Can you follow this? It's overwhelming when you get into this kind of space. So what was your kind of tact or thinking in just sending that message? Was it literally just a kind of, at the time, just see what happens, or was there kind of a bit of craft to it as well?
I mean, it wasn't, it was, I mean, it was a genuine, the main part of the thought process was who's going to enjoy it. Because I could have, you could ping something out to loads of people, but actually, who is actually the writer that's going to respond to it that you think, okay, yes, I get that. So my next book, for example, The Forest Remembers, I wouldn't send to Clay because I don't think it's probably in his lane. And then it's about, I mean, I think you have to be, obviously it's about being polite and saying, look, I really, I hope you don't mind me sliding into your DMs, but here we are.
Yeah.
Really brief message, really simple. No, obviously no like big hype, just this is the back cover copy. I think you'd like it. Let me know if you'd be prepared to read it. That was it essentially. And he replied within 10 minutes.
That's nuts, isn't it? This is what I think a lot of people don't get as well, is like, particularly with social media, like even with podcasting, some of the guests I've reached out to, it's just been a quick message on what was Twitter at the time, or, on Instagram, or just a quick email. And I think people will be surprised how responsive some people can be, and other people aren't. Other people do just ignore it or let it go. But like, I don't think that's a thing that people should take personally or prevent them from reaching out to people just on the off chance that something like this happens.
Oh, absolutely. When other people did say no, which is fine, and a couple of people ignored me, which is also fine, because they're busy, they have books coming out and they're writing and stuff is going on and they have lives, and lots of people probably going, please read my book. And I do think with Play, I think part of it was that I just thought it was something that he would find entertaining.
Yeah.
And he obviously saw that in it, which was very good of him.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that you see your first little books as more Blumhouse movies, and your later ones you're trying to move more, or you're moving more into your A24 phase writing. Can you explain to listeners what that means and how you're taking that approach with your writing?
So that sounds really, really pretentious.
I love it.
Now you said that back, that sounds really pretentious. I've been saying that to people, and now I've heard it back, and I'm like, wow, that's really kind of wanky. Let's be honest. So I think it's partly about the fact that I don't want to keep repeating myself. Some writers are very, very successful because they essentially write the same book over and over and over again, or perhaps coming from a different angle, but you can see the mechanics
Yes.
of their book. That's not something that interests me at all. So I want to be constantly moving like a shark. And I finished writing. So when I finished The House That Screamed, I started on The Forest Remembers, and I had become really interested in the manosphere and toxic masculinity, and that was really where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And I had intended to write a slasher, and I ended up writing a folk horror because the book became the thing that the book became. And when I say it's A24, it's much more, it's elegiac and it's haunting and it's a slower burn and it's much more ambiguous. There's a lot of loamy soil and trees and fecundity, um, but and I had a really brutal beta reader, which I loved because I had obviously the House that Screamed was still doing what it was doing, and I put out a call for beta readers, and someone who'd read The Harvest went me, I want to read this. So I sent it to them, and I was sitting one evening, and they were in the US, I was in the UK, obviously, and it was about 11 p.m. and I just got a slew of messages going, I can't believe this is the same person that wrote The Harvest. Nothing happens. It's so boring. You've completely got this wrong. And I actually took that as a compliment because I was like, do you know what? Because I don't want to repeat the same
Mm-hmm.
kind of mad, gory stuff. I think it's a scary novel, and hopefully it's a haunting novel, going back to what we were saying earlier. And I actually had 6 indie publishers wanted, so I submitted it, and I had 6 publishers came back and said, yes, we're interested in publishing this story, which was good. But this person's messages were brutal, and she kept coming back. They kept coming back on it and going like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't even get through it. It's so bad." And I was like, just stop reading. I'm laughing. I'm going to stop reading it then. But it's a different register. Interesting. House That Screamed obviously is, say, in the US. It's kind of out there, whereas Forest Remembers is much closer to something like The Lonely meets The Lighthouse. If you've seen that film,
I know The Lonely, but The Lighthouse I've got familiarity with, but I haven't seen it.
But it's a very different. It's just a very different feel, and
sort of more atmospheric, slower burn.
Definitely that, and definitely I think something that I hope. Yeah, it's really difficult. It's difficult to describe. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole when it came to toxic masculinity and the manosphere, which just depressed the hell out of me. And I think as well, I was drafting it when we lost our dog, and I know you've been through this recently,
Yes.
so forgive me. And so past that book was written out of grief. And I think every author, someone said every author has a book that carries a piece of their soul, and I feel like The Forest Remembers tore out a piece of my soul. I won't give it back, and I'm really interested to see what people think of it. I think it might be. I'm just interested to see how people react to it.
It sounds down my alley. I'm going to reach out after and ask for an advance of that, because I'm currently reading Withered Hill by David Barnett.
Oh yeah, absolutely. David, brilliant. And
it's my first one of his that I've read, and you mentioning about sort of the forest and fecundity and all that kind of stuff.
And also the forest is, my forest is kind of forest is liminal space. Have you ever seen The Company of Wolves?
I haven't.
Okay, so that won't help. It's like The Company of Wolves. It's like, for listeners, it's like The Company of Wolves without the wolves, but the forest is a kind of liminal space that is kind of takes on a life of its own, and these damaged men. And it kind of pokes a bit at the wellness industry as well, because this is about. Sorry, go on.
Oh, have you read Annihilation, Jeff Vandermeer?
Yeah.
That kind of. There's a lot going on. It's just unsaid.
Yeah, 100%. Loads unsaid, and the interesting stuff and the relationship particularly between these two men exists in the space between the lines, and I think different readers will interpret it differently, which is fun. And also that sense of reality, just a couple of degrees not quite right.
Yes.
And I had a lot of, it was a really interesting, it took a lot out of me writing that book. I'm not gonna lie, it really did. The House That Screamed was an art
Yeah.
because of the challenge of getting it to work, and the Forest Members was just crushingly emotional and draining.
Ooh. Well, you're selling it. I mean, I've got a novella in very, very close to the finish line now that was, I think, sounds like my equivalent of that, where it was literally the a period of a lot of personal trauma and turmoil converted into a book and just vomited onto the page and then like crafted over time. Um,
It's cheaper than therapy.
I did both. That was a mistake.
Oh,
Absolutely not. I will reiterate for anyone listening, I absolutely 100% back counselling and therapy, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
oh, so do I. Sorry, no, I wasn't. I was just. No, God, no, I wasn't.
No,
I wasn't throwing shade at therapy. I was just saying it was cheaper for me to write that book. It kind of got it
for
a
sure.
lot of stuff out onto the page.
Yeah, do both. Just double attack it.
And really interesting. Sorry, just to say, just before I finish on that, and really interesting to write a book about toxic characters, and they really are difficult characters. But to make them empathetic was a real challenge.
Okay, so how do you think you achieved that?
Time will tell. Time will tell whether I have or not. I mean, I think it was partly about not condemning them, but also not glorifying it. Because obviously, I think there's a lot of stuff. It's interesting now because this story has blown up. When I finished that book over a year ago, but actually, it's now blown up because there's been the whole Louis Theroux documentary and all the stuff about Andrew Tate, and I was really interested because actually there is no definition of toxic. I kept hearing about toxic masculinity, but it's not actually a thing. It's a kind of bucket of things. Yeah. But I didn't want to glorify it, but I also wanted to perhaps show a degree of, without condoning people's actions, but to try to show some reasons for why those characters end up where they are and their journey to quote unquote healing.
Yeah,
we'll leave that there. It's quite a strange one. I reread it. I've just reread the opening this week, and it'll be interesting to see how much of it survives the edit because it's pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, it's piqued my interest. But you say this book comes out in 2027. Yes. We've spoken a little bit about small presses, and obviously this will be your third run with a small press and the book coming out. What are some tips for people who are looking at approaching small presses? How did you source the ones that you're after, for example? And do you have any kind of tips or tricks that you think help to sell your book to the right people?
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly, you need to do a lot of research and spend a lot of time on it. So understand who they publish, what they're publishing, what their distribution is like, because that's actually critical, because quite a lot of small presses are small, but they really don't have any distribution apart from kind of putting it on Amazon and kind of going, oh, we hope that works. Yeah. I think, and also Forest Members is actually being published by a larger small press than the first two books. So I've kind of moved. And I think treat it as if you are querying an agent. So you really need to put together quite a professional, well thought through submission package. Different small presses ask for different things. So the publisher for Harvest and House That Screamed asked the full manuscript. The publisher for the Forest Members asked for a query letter first, I think 3 chapters, and a synopsis. So really understand what they're asking for. And crucially, there are a lot of sharks in the waters, and this is something I have learned. And be mindful of, who owns the property, and for how long, and make sure they're not charging you. Because I remember the first publishing contract I got offered for the Harvest was a red letter day, and I was very, very excited. And I was like, you must have champagne. Where you go? This. And I got the contract, and it was like their new author's contribution, £3,000. And I went, what? So I said to them, what is this author's contribution? Oh, that's your share of the publication price. And I was like, you are literally taking the mickey. I've spent ages working on this bloody thing, and now you're trying to charge me for you to publish it. That's not how this works. And I think people get caught by that a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, and that's something I find really worrying, actually. And I think that, and you do read, I mean, obviously, like others, I'm on various writing groups on Facebook, and you hear people all the time going, oh, I've signed with this publisher and they're charging me for the cover and they're charging me for this, that, and the next thing. It's like, no, what are you doing?
I spoke to an author a few weeks ago who I met per chance in the local town, and they're writing book 3. They've published book 2, but the company that they published their book for or with, they paid £5,000. They signed over all of their rights. Additional rounds of edits, even when he found typos in the final publication, cost him £200. And we had, I didn't know him all that well, but we had quite a stern chat in which I kind of tried to help him not sign his 3rd book with them. But they do exist. And, I've had people that I know who are friends that have gotten into publishing that have then done these services charging people. And I think in the very, very small cases, there is a case for it. If all you want is just to have a book printed and you don't want to deal with a faff and you're not worried about growing or anything like that, there are, cases where it's kind of okay. But you're right, for the most chance, it should not be a case of you having to put any money forward to get your book published. That's just, especially this day and age, you can publish it yourself for free. So what is it they're offering that would actually make that money worth it?
Well, exactly. And I think one of the things they're offering is a false sense of validation, because I think there are publishers, so-called publishers out there who go, oh, we're selective. We only select X percentage of what's sent to us, and you send the stuff, and then they leave it a decent length of time, and then go, yes, you're one of the 20% of submissions that we accept. You just have to be really, really careful with and do your research and find out about and speak to other writers that they published, which is something I did. As I reached out to people that they published and said, what's your experience? And then you'll find, if you get, but it is like guessing. It is not, I think sometimes people think, oh, if, getting selected by an indie press is a sort of easier route than other routes. And I'm not absolutely sure it is.
Intriguing.
Well, I'll tell you next time, because I'm querying at the moment. So
okay,
we'll get
you back on it. We'll do a round 2.
Yeah, we'll do the bit of the bruising and neck brace, and it's all yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are coming up close to time now. So before we go into the quick fire round, is there anything you want the listeners to know about your book that's coming out or has come out as of last week? And what is next for yourself?
So, book that's coming out, obviously, we've discussed The House that Screamed, meta horror, found footage. It's kind of crazy. It's got a lot of energy to it. It's creepy. It's thought provoking. It's weird. Enjoy it. Read it. I hope you enjoy it. Up next for me is I've got, obviously, Forest Members due out in 2027. That's being edited right now. I've got a manuscript out on Query, which is a period Gothic. So again, very, very different. And I've just polished another manuscript, which is a weird coming of age kind of thing. And I'm not even sure what it is.
That's always a great way to start.
Yeah, not a clue what it is. I'm really pleased with it, but I'm not quite sure what it is yet.
Fantastic. Okay, so are you ready now to jump into the famous quickfire round?
Not really.
Not even at all. So for people listening, I'm going to throw 10 questions at Alex as fast as I can. Alex has to try and respond to them as quickly as he can. I know from past experience that this doesn't always go out as quickly as it could, but I just realised I've got a question missing on my thing. I might make one up in the moment. Let's see what happens. I thought I'm just looking at it now. Okay, 10 questions fired at you as quickly as possible. Are you ready?
Yep, ready.
Number 1, what's your favourite drink?
Diet Coke.
Bees or bats?
Bats.
How many helium-filled balloons would it take to lift a Pennywise?
I don't think he's liftable because he's actually an entity rather than a creature.
Lakes or swamps?
Swamps.
Haunted houses or gritty folk horror?
Oh, gritty folk horror.
Which author is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. Now I'm going to struggle with that. Um, I
While
don't
you're
know.
thinking, I'll give you mine. Rachel Harrison, but not for the reason you think. It's just because I feel weird holding a book with a pink cover.
That's really interesting, actually. I mean, I probably Richard Lehman, who you mentioned earlier.
Well, that's a good one, to be fair, because he is very, very questionable by today's standards.
Very.
Question 7. Where do you store your eggs?
In the cupboard.
Do you prefer reading physical books or ebooks?
Ebooks.
Name one author whose books you wish you'd written.
Peter Straub.
What one book would you recommend above all others, excluding your own?
I'm going to ask this in two ways. Forgive me. To everybody, I would say Ghost Story by Peter Straub, but I hyped the guy enough already. I'm going to say a book called The Grey House by an Armenian novelist called Mariam Petrosyan, which changed my life.
Intriguing. I've not heard of that one.
You
I'll
have
check it
now.
out.
You
Yeah.
need to read that. If you've got time to read a 900-page
Oh, Jesus.
book about,
Stuff.
stuff. I've read it twice and I'm still not sure what it's about.
Wow.
But it changed my life.
And bonus question, where can my listeners find out all about yourself and everything you've got going on?
Website is alexhunterhorror.com, and on Insta I'm alexhunterwrites.
Wonderful. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us this week on the Writer's Chair podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. If today's conversation sparked something inside you, go and do something with it. That's the whole point. And if you want to go deeper, whether that's your writing, your process, or actually finishing your book, head over to danielwillcocks.com/writers. There's a growing list of resources for you over there, including my brand new free 7-day course, Finish Your Damn Draft, sharing the key lessons that took me from struggling author to publishing over 70 books. And until next time, my friends, write bravely and dream big. Thanks again, Alex.